This is a recording of Soraya Newell, longtime Subud member, had many jobs in Subud. And Soraya, can you start by just talking a little bit about what your life was like just before you came into Subud?
Before I came into Subud, I was an undergraduate student at UC Berkeley. I think it was my senior year, so I was about 20. And I was an English major at UC Berkeley, so it was everything about reading and writing was my interest. And I came into Subud because I rented a room from a woman named Patricia O'Gara. She had a house in Berkeley, needed a room. And one day she came to me and she said, please don't come out into the living room for a while. I'm going to do my Larihana, just don't come. I said, okay. And after a few minutes, there issued forth the sound of an angel singing without words. And I went, whoa, what? I want that. And so that's how I found about Subud. She took me to the Berkeley meeting hall, and I was supposed to sit out there for about 3 months and then asked to get opened. And in fact, I could not make myself ask to get opened. It was like I couldn't put my foot in the water. I sat outside that Latihan for 3 months, and then I sat outside that Latihan for a little more. And finally the helpers said, so would you like to be open Monday, Saturday, whatever it was? And I said, okay, yeah. And so I was open.
So why do you think you were hesitating?
I'm a pretty cautious person. I don't usually jump in, and this was certainly something I was taking on faith.
So what was your first Latihan like?
I remember, I think it was, I heard the words and I started to sort of fade out. And all I can remember about my first Latihans was that I was down on the floor feeling like a frog, you know, very. And I'm sure there was a lot of crying going on. And that went on for a while, but things got better.
So what year was this? When were you open?
January 1965.
So
More than 50 years ago.
yeah, congratulations. So you had mentioned before that you had some experiences around Bapak. When was the first time you saw Bapak?
I moved to Los Angeles after I graduated from UC Berkeley. So that would be the spring or summer of 1965. And whatever years Bapak was making his tours, I saw him in Santa Monica or whatever town he stayed in. Usually it was Santa Monica. And I once went up to San Francisco to see him when he was in San Francisco. So that's all of the times I saw Bapak. And by 67, when I'd been opened for 2 years, it was the Subud World Congress in Japan. And it so happens that at the previous Subud National Congress, we were Subud North America. I was part of the bylaws committee, and I helped write the first bylaws for Subud North America. And then they put me on the board for Subud North America, not with any particular job or position, just one of the members of the board. So when it came time for the Subud World Congress in Tokyo, I was actually an official of some kind, that is a member of the board of Subud North America. And I hadn't made up my mind to go to the Congress, actually. And then I got fired from my job. I think it's the only job I ever got fired from. And it was rather late to make, to get a registration to the Congress or a place to stay or anything. And the woman who was currently secretary of Subud North America was a woman named Melinda Nixon. Not the Melinda we knew and loved later, but an earlier Melinda secretary. And she had just presumed that I would be going to the Congress. So she had made the reservations for me. Okay, I'm going to the Congress. There was I think they rented a plane. They like took a charter, and all the people from California got on that plane and went off. I think we went first to Hawaii, stopped in Hawaii. I did anyway, because I didn't have my visa. It was done at such last moments that I had to pick up my visa in Hawaii on my way to Japan, because it would be ready after I had left on the plane, but before I left Hawaii. So that worked out that way. And off we were to Tokyo. It was like a steam bath. July, late July, and hot and humid, even at night.
Yeah, I remember that. And there were long lines of people waiting to get in the hotel.
Yes, there are. And I remember I was with Hussein Chung and his wife and small children. And we were waiting. They wanted to get a big Japanese bedroom, with lots of futons, and then they'd all just crash in there. And they were, Hussein was very impatient about the whole long lines process. And I think he, was a little rude. And I remember when it was my turn up at the counter, I said to the clerk, you're, treating us so well, we're really behaving badly. And he said, oh yes, we are too polite.
So you're going to talk about your encounters with Papa. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, the Congress was at Yomiuri Land, which was a sort of they thought of it as the Disneyland of Japan. It was like a sideshow. It was a very small amusement park. And the first day of the Congress happened to be July 24th, 1967. It was my 24th birthday. I was born on July 24th, 1943. And I had known since I was a very small child that the year I was as old as the day of the month I was born on, that is the 24th year of my life. I was born on the 24th day of July. That 24th year of my life would be my special year. I have no idea, how I got that idea or what it would mean, but that's what I spent my growing up years knowing. So here I was on my 24th birthday, sitting right in front of Bapak in the audience in the first row, getting maximum zap, maximum, influence of the feeling of sitting there in a room with Bapak. And the Congress began. I had no official business at the Congress, but I am a compulsive note taker. So I had notebooks and pen, and as the first words were spoken, my hand went to the paper and started writing. I actually could understand things better if I'd written them down than if I'd just heard them. I wrote and they talked and talked and talked. And one day, a few days in, I think, Bapak said something which he said was a guiding principle. And after the days, or I don't know, when we broke at lunch, when we broke for dinner, Virendra was there. He's Bapak's, he was the chair of Subud World Association for about 30 years. And he was a great storyteller. He worked for the UN. And Virendra came up to me, sitting in the audience with shuffling my notebooks, and said that guiding principle. I have it on the tape, but it'll take hours to find it. Do you perchance have it in those notes you were taking? And I looked, and I did. I had the guiding principle. It was something about a bank, making a bank. And so he got it straight from my notes, and we started to hang around together, and we had dinner together, and we told jokes, and we had fun, and nothing hanky-panky, just buddies. I had a wonderful time, of course, hanging out with Verinda. He was the best possible company anyone could have. That is how my World Congress went.
So did you meet Bapak at the Congress or had a chance to talk to him?
Not, as far as I remember, have a chance to talk to him. But after the Congress was over, some people were going to Tlaloc, and I thought, I guess I'd like to do that too, but I don't know if there's any rooms. And of course, Melinda Nixon had assumed I would be going to Tlaloc, and I had a reservation. So off I went. And I certainly got to at least be in a meeting with Bapak. I don't know if I can say I met him in the sense of exchanging names and shaking hands, but I got to be up close with Bapak a bit. Yes, thank you. There was a lot of fufura going on right then. Prio Hartono was one of the secretariat who answered letters, and he had written an article in the first edition of the Cebu World News. And in it, he said things like, there's a whole new Latihan. The Latihan is, there's a whole new Latihan, and it's different, and here's how it is. And when we were in Tlaloc, and I was hanging out with Berindra and this guy named Robin McGee from Britain, Robin wondered whether Bapak knew what Prio had written. So he went and asked him. And Bapak had no idea what Prio had written in the Cebu World News, and he did not like it. So a meeting was called for that night, and Berindra had appointed me and Robin to work on the Cebu World News. So he told us to go, and the other people at the meeting were Bapak, Prio, Darto, and Brojo, and Bapak's son-in-law, Asihir. And the meeting was not translated. But what they did was Bapak tested something, and then each of the men tested that same thing. And later, Asikin translated for Robin and me. And what they were testing was how is your sexual purification? How is the nature of your sexual forces? Are you true or are you not? And and Bapak's testing was really beautiful. He was like a young shepherd boy, innocent, out in the fields, doing his thing. And Prio looked very embarrassed about what he had received. And Brojo looked pretty cool with it, whatever he received. So there was a retraction and a new article in the second edition of the Cebu World News saying that no, the new Latihan, that was kind of a mistake there. And Bapak told Prio that you cannot write clearly about Subud or give explanations about Subud until you've completed your sexual purification. It's clear that Bapak had and Prio hadn't, so Prio was not to be giving anything more than just his own experiences.
Yeah, I remember that article, and kind of a hullabaloo that happened after that too.
Yeah, it was.
So what happened after that? You came back to Los Angeles and
Yeah, in Toronto for about 2 months. I worked in the secretariat, typing letters. I got to see that Buckup did indeed answer letters in green ink, and that he did not capitalize Buckup.
sorry, I didn't understand what you said. Did not what?
It was like he was not Buckup with a capital B. He was just Buckup when he wrote.
Yeah.
And I got to see how difficult it is to proofread a letter you are typing in a language you do not speak. I was typing some answers in Indonesian. And I learned a little Indonesian while I was there too. Like I was able to barter for cigarettes at the local market, apparently successfully, doing a good job of getting them for the good price. Then I went home to Los Angeles. October in Los Angeles is quite hot. I was freezing when I got off the plane because Chilliwack was so much hotter.
Yeah.
Yes, I started getting jobs and living my life. Whatever.
So what stands out in your memories from different experiences that you've had in Cebu? Anything special that you think of?
I think of one story I don't think I've ever told. I tend to go to a lot of congresses and do committee work. That's more my thing. Though I was appointed helper, committee work was more my thing than helper work. And I became chair of Cebu, California, by testing at the California Congress in 1991. And that term was over in 1993. And I was resisting people's suggestion or my impulse or not, or lack of impulse to test for national chair. As the head of Cebu, California, I was on the national committee as the chairman of my my state, my subunit.
Yeah.
But so I'd already spent 2 years on that board. And so it came to time to pre-test as to whether I should offer myself up for testing for the chair of Subud USA. And I started testing, and I thought, why are you avoiding what I've spent so many years preparing you for? So then I tested whether I should test for national chair. And I got really the most unexpected grammar I have ever seen in a sentence. It was only 3 words. It was, God trusts Soraya. I mean, I'm familiar with sentences like, I trust God, Soraya trusts God. I am not familiar with that construction. God trusts Soraya. So I went and I tested for national chair. And in fact, I was the national chair for the next 2 years, from 93 to 95.
Yeah. And what stands out in your term as chair?
Subud USA was not being donated enough money by the members. We were on hard times. And I remember just telling Melinda not to publish the Subud USA newspaper. And she was a little shocked. And I said, they need to realize that things are not not going along as usual. It means there's something really important about needing to support Subud now. And I remember that someone suggested that we will send out an email or a call or whatever to all the rich people and see if they'll pop for another jolt of money. And I said, no, I don't want to beat the horses who have already been asked to until they're dead. I want everybody to have a consciousness that Subud wants them to support. The Subud USA financially. And so we sent out a letter telling them more or less that, that we couldn't afford to put out the newspaper, and this was the situation with Subud USA and the finances, and we needed everybody to remember that though the Ladihan was free, the meeting halls and the accountants and everything else was not, and that they needed to help support Subud, and they did. I also suggested to Melinda that we start doing the newspaper digitally and put it online, and she and everybody else didn't want to do that at that time, but eventually we did get to that. And that's where it is now.
So what about spiritual experiences?
Spiritual experiences.
Had any of those?
Oh, I had a few. Yeah, I must confess that I really, really like to test because I receive well. And I've always remembered that when Bapak was talking about the nature of peoples and the nature of different religions, that he said, the gift of God, the gift of Almighty God to the Jews was the ability to receive directly in the mind. Which means I didn't just get the movements, I got the script. I got the explanation, I got the words, I got the what happens next sometimes. So the testing was wonderful. And testing at the Tokyo Congress was really the best testing I think I've ever experienced. Do you want to hear all the way back to that?
Yeah.
So Babak tested with the ladies. How is it for a good woman who enters paradise? And I received a shaping, the shape of my personality, which was like a shape of a plastic bag full of water, full of ladihan, floating in a large body of water. So there was no difference between the ladihan outside and the ladihan inside, except the part of the ladihan that was inside had been impressed, had been shaped by my personality. And that's all that was left of me. So that was good. And the other fabulous test they tested with us was, how do the angels quarrel with each other? And I got, oh, you silly, you have done it again. All laughter and no anger. It's a good lesson. I don't think I really learned it that well in my life, but I certainly don't like getting angry at anyone.
Yeah.
So, there was something unusual that happened when I was chair of Subud USA. It had nothing to do with Subud USA. It had something to do with me and how heavy the job was on me at a certain point. And I tested what should I do? And I got a really unusual answer. I got pray for South Africa and for the people of South Africa. I have no relations with South Africa. I have no guilt relative to the awful things that have happened in this country before my Jewish relatives emigrated in the 1908 period. I must pray for South Africa. That was it. So I started praying for South Africa and the people of South Africa and the well-being, and that heaviness went away.
Was that when South Africa was still under apartheid?
I don't know. I don't think so, but it was between 93 and 95. So when did apartheid end?
Yeah, I don't remember. It's interesting that you received that.
And never any explanation for why. It was just, that was the thing to do, and that helped a lot.
So what's been going on since then in your life?
I think the only office I've held since I was chair of Subud USA was that Lorenzo Music got me to test to be on the California Council when he was regional chair. I didn't want to, but he guilted me into it. He said, you know, you're afraid to test, you know, afraid what the truth might be, you know, so I tested, and lo and behold, there I was, like vice chair or secretary or something. And that's the last Subud office I held. I pretty much stopped going to congresses after that because I did not want to be tested into any more jobs. But I do say that the most unusual thing in my Subud life since then, in 1999, I was in New York helping my cousin move her business from one location to another. And I had a small stroke, a TIA, we call them. I couldn't move my left arm, you know, above straight out. And I was in the hospital for about a week. And when I came home to Los Angeles and was in Latihan, I could feel like everyone in the room doing their Latihan under my skin. I couldn't stay in the room. I was like wide open. I had a lot of trouble being in elevators with other people, or just overwhelmed by, I guess, a really abrupt sort of opening. And generally after that, I did Latihan alone often with Lisa Tour, who was my vice chair when I was Subud USA chair, and sometimes with the helpers. And after a while, I got a receiving, and I was told, because I was having trouble receiving the Latihan, I was trouble feeling the Latihan. That's it. The helpers all said I was in Latihan, but I could not feel it. And I got this explanation that said, the stroke was more serious than you knew. And you have been given the gift to take the damage on the inner. So I was in a way paralyzed on the inner and still walking and talking out
here. Interesting receiving.
Really. So, you know, I have to say I'm a real fan of testing.
So how do you feel now about the progress of Subud?
Feel like we were young and we were all having children, and there were nursery schools and schools for teenagers and enterprises, and Subud was growing, and people from the entertainment field were joining, and we were going to be famous and we were going to be big, and the world would be able to be helped by Subud, which was a wonderful thing. And here we are. Everybody's gray. and very few people are coming in. And I feel like, has time passed us by? Are we like the Shakers? You know, are we something wonderful that just didn't take fire enough? I know that we've been told, you know, you don't need to solicit for Subud. You don't need to do that. But I disagree. I may be wrong, but I'm confident that I disagree. So I'm leaving some money to Subud solely for the purpose of outreach. I'm leaving it to Subud Los Angeles and Subud California and Subud USA. And if they don't want to do outreach, so they won't have the money. Too bad. That's all I can do. Nothing else. I mean, nobody's advertising, nobody's giving public talks, nobody's, I don't know what it was we were supposed to do, but somehow it seems like something just didn't mesh. And it really mustn't disappear, but if we're all old and gray, then what?
Yeah, I have more hope for the future, I guess.
I'm sure, and I'm really glad that other people have more hope, because it would be really depressing if everybody was feeling like I am.
Yeah. Well, I think God works in a little different time frame than most people. So
Well, we won't be here to welcome them in. We'll have sold the houses and gone on. And then what? When they find it all over again, then someone else receives it. I don't know. Most of our children are not doing Lanihan that I know. Maybe they are.
the one thing I was wondering about, you were married to Miss Soraya Newell. Do you feel like talking a bit about that, or is that too personal?
But what would you want to know?
Just how you got married, and what was the reason? I guess you broke up and after a while.
I was living in Los Angeles. It was not long after the Tokyo Congress, 67 or 68. And I remember seeing this guy at Larihan, and I went up to him. We were, I think, all online for a short, a dinner that we had all brought potluck for. And I remember I went up to him and I asked him, "Where's your wife?" And he said, "I don't know." So that's all I remember about courting. But indeed, we did get married in the fall, I guess in the August, September of 1968. And my daughter, Arifa, was born July the 3rd, 1969, already 2 weeks late. Basically, I did not have a period after I got married. Soraya Newell had excellent aim. I was pregnant in the first month. And he turned out to be, unfortunately, a very angry person, which I really couldn't do. And when we were first married and moving to Carmel Valley, we were in his truck full of furniture, driving up. We stopped somewhere, and I remember being so very upset about how difficult it was to have a conversation with this upset person. And I said, "Okay, give it 5." I'd actually wanted to call it off before the wedding, but I just didn't have the chutzpah. I just didn't, I would have been too embarrassed to do it. I didn't have the guts. So I was giving it 5 years, and it was over by 3. I just couldn't do it. I wrote to Ibu. I did not write to Bakak. You have to understand, for those of you who were not in Subud at that time, that Subud was very much a don't get divorced. Just work it out. Kind of place. And I knew that if I got divorced, I would be disapproved of very widely. And I decided I really would rather live alone for the rest of my life than be married to this difficult person. But I did not write to Bakak, who I was sure would say, no. So I wrote to his daughter, Ibu. Wrote to Ibu Rahayu. And I wish I had a copy of the letter I sent. I don't. But I do have a copy of the letter she sent me. It's in her handwriting in English. And I think it would be good to interview people about what interesting letters have they received from Chalandak, because some people have received more than just their names. Also, people have received so many different names that might be interesting to ask people, you know, like, what were your different names for or about, or how did they affect you, or so on. Anyway, so I got this letter from Ibu, and she said, there was no real bond formed. And if there was no real bond formed, then it is all right for you to get divorced. But I have surely one of the world's nicest, most beautiful, most talented, most brilliant daughters anyone ever was awarded. So there's that. So Mashuri, then he went to Hawaii, and then he asked me for a divorce. We didn't divorce when we separated, we just separated. And so years later, he asked for a divorce because he wanted to marry Rosalind Berger. I don't know anything about their marriage, but I don't think it worked out very well either. And then he apparently got a sailboat or a motorboat and sailed off to Indonesia and actually arrived from Hawaii to Indonesia. I believe that's the story. I haven't inquired of anybody who knew him there, but that's what I've heard. And in Indonesia, he knew about motors and engines, particularly boat engines, but regular engines. And Chalandak was certainly in need of somebody who could repair the generator and keep it running. So I understand that was some of what he did. And I heard other things, like he went into crisis and wrote his family that he was not really their son anymore. He was Bapak's son. And they were really, really upset. And I remember him writing me something about, I should not be too surprised when I heard that he would be marrying one of Bapak's granddaughters, which was also a delusion. So I'm sorry not to have nicer things to say.
So did he pass away, or is he still alive?
Passed away in Chalandak about 2001. He had cancer.
Well, I don't have any more questions. Do you have anything more that you'd like to add?
Well, since I brought up the subject of names, I could tell you about all my different names and what they did.
Okay.
Okay, so my name when I was Stephanie. And I always liked that it was different, but I didn't like it as my name. So I was trying to get rid of my name when I was 8 years old. I remember when I was 8 or 10, coming home from going to town and telling my mother that I was not Stephanie, I was Helen. And she said, well, that's too bad because there's ice cream and we have ice cream for Stephanie. We don't have any ice cream for Helen. And I said, Stephanie. So that put an end to that. But when I got into Subud and the whole, everybody pretty much was changing their names. I certainly signed up for that experience too. And I sent for a new name. And I got one of the names I would never, ever have wanted. I got Loretta. Spelled Lauretta. I guess, because I certainly was in control of choosing that spelling, and I must confess I must have put it on a list, having been sent, you know, your name starts with L, send Babak a list of 5 names or 10 names or whatever it was. So I must have put that on a list. But when it came back as my name, I was really sorry. And I wore that name probably for a couple of years. And I received that name was to make me friendlier. After Mashuri and I got married, I was talking to myself in my head and I said, so Loretta, and this little voice said, I'm not Loretta. And I said, who are you? And this little voice said, I'm Mashuri's wife. And I said, what's your name? And the little voice said, you'll have to ask Papa. So I asked for a name. And Babak said, your name should begin with S, which is the name I started with. And if you want a Christian name, it is Sylvia. And if you want a Muslim name, it is Salama. So I was married to a Muslim man. And to match, I kind of wanted a Muslim name, but I wasn't a Muslim, and I was darned if I was going to ask for a Muslim name. I wasn't going to ask. However, my stepmother was named Sylvia, and that wasn't a name I liked any better than Rana. So I was Salam. And I was Salama for till my daughter was 5. So for about till 1975, say. And then I wasn't Salama anymore. I wasn't Mashuri's wife, and Salama was Mashuri's wife. So I needed a new name. And I was given Soraya. And generally, that's a Persian name, pronounced Soraya. But I got that mine was not pronounced with, you know, I, or I. And later I found, long after I'd gotten the name, that in Turkish it's Soraya, and in Russian it's Zoria. So I pronounced it Soraya, and the meaning of it in all 3 of those cultures has something to do with light. The quality of light at dawn or at dusk, or the light from the farthest stars, or, you know, light. So here I am. I'm Soraya.
So you bring the light, huh?
Yes, sir.
Good. Well, I have no more questions. Last thing, if you have anything else to add.
Hello, goodbye. Please bring people to soup.
Thank you.